Welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here today. We're about to dive headfirst into a really fascinating, objective investigation into one of history's absolute darkest chapters. And we're going to see how our sources connect those ancient threads right up to the highest levels of modern power. It's a dense topic for sure, but we're breaking it down step by step using the evidence and claims presented in our source material. So let's just get right into it. The core question driving our explainer today is this. Did the dark rituals of the ancient world truly end, or have they simply moved into the shadows? For centuries, we've kind of just brushed off ancient mythological sacrifices as, well, myths, just spooky stories meant to scare kids or explain away the brutal nature of primitive societies, right? But as we actually dig into the archaeological records and the source texts, a much, much more uncomfortable picture begins to emerge. It literally forces us to ask, does human nature ever really change? Or do the powerful simply find new, more sophisticated ways to operate? Section 1. The Ancient Fires, the Reality of Carthage. To understand the claims being made about modern power structures, we've got to ground ourselves in historical and archaeological fact. We need to look at what actually happened back then. Imagine standing in a crowded ancient city square. Towering right above you is a massive 20-meter-tall bronze statue with the head of a bull. Its giant metal hands are heated up, stretching downward toward a roaring fire. Our sources describe a truly horrific scene. Families lining up, a mother placing her infant into those glowing bronze hands, and the child sliding directly into the flames while deafening drumbeats drown out the sound. And the most chilling detail, the mother was strictly forbidden to shed a single tear. If she cried, the sacrifice was considered void and she'd lose her payment. Now, you might want to write this off as a dark legend, but archaeological excavations in places like Carthage and Sicily have actually unearthed hundreds of urns packed with burned bones. This proves that for 800 years, this horrifying ritual was an absolute reality. So why would a society ever do this? We need to define the driving forces here. First, we have Baal. In the ancient world, Baal was considered the lord of the sky. The deity they believed controlled the rain, and by extension, their entire survival. Then we have Moloch. Now, Moloch isn't just a name, it represents the horrifying tradition itself. The specific act of passing children through the fire as the ultimate sacrifice to appease these forces. Getting a handle on these two concepts is absolutely crucial before we examine any modern connections. These desperately dark rituals spread like wildfire across the ancient globe. Back around 2500 BCE in Mesopotamia, societies relied on stable rivers for survival. But jump to 1500 BCE in the Levant, think modern-day Lebanon and Syria, and civilizations depended totally on unpredictable rain. This intense fear of drought is what birthed the extreme worship of Baal. Fast forward to 1000 BCE, Phoenician traders start exporting this system, building temples across North Africa. And get this, by 500 BCE, they had reached the British Isles, setting up what were known as Baltane, literally meaning fire of Baal, rituals. The sheer terror of nature pushed humanity to extreme, unthinkable measures. Our source material also pulls from scriptural texts to provide context for this historical madness. For instance, this quote from the Quran, Surah Al-An'am, gives a profound warning. It states that dark forces, referred to as shaitan, normalize the killing of children, making it actually seem appealing or necessary, with the ultimate goal of destroying those societies and confusing their moral compass. It's an incredibly powerful observation on how destructive acts can be completely rationalized by entire civilizations under the guise of survival or religious duty. Section 2. Echoes in the Redwoods, the Bohemian Grove Ritual. Now, jumping from the ancient Mediterranean to the 21st century, our source material begins drawing parallels to secretive modern gatherings, and the sheer concentration of power here is staggering. Deep in the redwood forests of Northern California, a highly secretive retreat takes place every single July. The guest list isn't just wealthy folks. We are talking former U.S. presidents, Fortune 500 CEOs, and CIA directors. By day, these are the men who run the global economy and international policy. By night, they gather in absolute secrecy, entirely away from the public eye. The contrast between their immense daytime influence and their hidden nighttime activities is exactly what our source material focuses on. When impartially examining the source text, a really fascinating comparison emerges. Back in the year 2000, secret footage leaked of a Bohemian Grove ritual called the cremation of care. Let's compare the two. You have the ancient sacrifices, which involved the literal burning of children before bronze statues to guarantee worldly survival. Then you have the modern cremation of care, which is a highly theatrical, symbolic burning of a human-shaped effigy in front of a massive 15-meter stone owl. Now, the organizers of the Grove claim this is simply a harmless, symbolic way for stressed leaders to burn away their daily burdens. But here is where the critics step in, bringing us to the critical thesis of our source material. By burning care, these powerful leaders are symbolically leaving behind their conscience and accountability before making decisions that affect the entire planet. The argument here isn't necessarily that these leaders are literal ancient priests. Actually, scratch that. It's more that the structural mirror is uncanny and deeply concerning. Critics argue that symbolically stripping away your care or conscience in a secret, firelit ceremony is a pretty terrifying mindset for the people holding the fate of the globe in their hands. Section 3. Shadows of Epstein's Island, the Golden Dome. This brings us to an even darker modern parallel in our explainer. The physical evidence and witness claims regarding Epstein's private island are frankly chilling. At the highest point sat this mysterious building with a golden dome. Witness testimonies report the horrific reality that young girls were frequently taken inside this structure for hours, a stark reminder of the very real, abhorrent child abuse and exploitation that occurred there. Disturbingly, when the FBI raided the site, reports indicate they found stylized drawings of bull-headed figures painted on the walls. Yes, the exact same symbols of Baal and Moloch we discussed earlier. The sources also cite shocking claims that pieces of the kiswa, the sacred black cloth covering the Kaaba, were purchased and brought to the island to be defiled in dark rituals, all aimed at gaining metaphysical power. So what does this all mean? The crucial conclusion the researchers draw is this. Whether it's the ancient shores of Carthage or a private island in the Caribbean, the underlying logic of extreme power hasn't changed. They argue that the mechanisms of using absolute fear, elite secrecy, and the systematic destruction of innocence are still being utilized to maintain control and shape what some call a new world order. The dark ambitions remain totally identical. It's only the technology and the level of modern privacy that have improved. Section 4. The Ultimate Standoff. Prophets versus Tyrants. To provide a complete picture, our sources flash back to ancient religious history. On Mount Carmel, a famous historical challenge took place to see whose power was actually real. Picture this. On one side, you have 450 priests of Baal. The text described them as frantic and desperate, physically cutting themselves and dancing around their altars, yet completely unanswered by the sky. On the other side, you have the Prophet Ilyas, who stood entirely alone. He didn't rely on theatrics or bloodshed, he simply made a quiet, sincere prayer to Allah. And it was that simple prayer that finally brought the rain. It's a really powerful juxtaposition of the bloody, chaotic failure of tyrannical systems against the calm certainty of divine guidance. Section 5. The Modern Conscience, a Warning from History. As we begin to wrap up this explainer, the source delivers a concluding warning, literally drawing a line from the ashes of ancient urns straight to our modern society. The lesson compiled from all these historical data points boils down to a striking warning. A society that sacrifices its future and its conscience for worldly comfort is walking toward a storm it cannot survive. Whether we are looking at the Carthaginians sacrificing their literal children for good weather, or modern elites symbolically burning their care to consolidate corporate and political power, the historical result is remarkably consistent. Systems that rely on darkness and the shedding of moral conscience ultimately collapse, often being erased from history entirely. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question to reflect on. As you go about your day-to-day life, what care and conscience is the world trying to burn away in you today? Are we, in our own small ways, being asked to sacrifice our morals for just a little more comforts or a little more success? I really want you to think about that. Well, if this explainer helped clarify these complex historical and modern connections for you, please take a moment to reflect on the information we've presented. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will see you in the next explainer.